Today, I'm going to show you how to paint this Astral Claws Tactical Marine. I start by airbrushing an even layer of Vallejo Metal Color Magnesium over a black undercoat. If you have not gotten a chance to try the Vallejo Metal Color range yet, I'd highly recommend doing so as they airbrush like a treat and go on very smoothly. Next up, I mix a little bit of aluminum into my paint cup and apply this lighter metal highlight over the entire model. It's a little hard to see here due to the harsh LED lights in my spray booth, but I apply this to the highest points of the Marine's armor that I want to be the lightest, such as the top of the head and shoulder pads, as well as the top of the knees and side of the legs. The next step is completely optional, but I like to add a little more color to my metallic schemes as I think it makes them more visually interesting and catches people's eyes a little more, even if you don't really notice it. So for this model, I decided to use a kind of bruised purplish brown mixture by mixing in some Violent and wood ink from scale 75. This mixture is pretty heavily thinned down, and applied as a light shade anywhere where shadows in the Marine's armor, such as the inside of the legs, underneath the arms, and the very bottoms of the shoulder pads, places like that. When using inks such as this, I highly recommend you turn your PSI and your airbrush compressor down fairly low so you get more control over where you're spraying. If you don't turn your PSI down, you run the risk of oversaturating the model with ink and having it kind of splatter all over the place or run across the model on you. For the blue on the shoulder pads, I start off by layering on Games Workshop Contour Blue over the entire thing. It's more important here to get a smooth and even coat than get a fully opaque one, as I'm going to build up the color later on, but it's extremely difficult to cover up thick paint and errant brush strokes. Next, I apply a thin layer of Drakenhof Nightshade over the entire pad to shade down the armor and to provide a little bit of contrast into the recesses. I really try to be careful here not to add too much of this shade to the model, otherwise I run the risk of it pooling and possibly obscuring details. To bring the blue back up on the shoulder pad, first I highlight it with Contour Blue, and then gradually apply smaller and smaller highlights of a mix of Contour Blue and Altdorf Guard Blue, until I get to an almost pure Altdorf Guard Blue at the very highest points of the shoulder pad. I then spray the entire model with a thin down layer of gloss varnish to prepare it for the next step. The decals I use on this model are from chaptercustomizer.com, and I would highly recommend checking them out if you are looking for any Badab War chapters, as I think they have them all with the exception of the Minotaurs. Once the decals are down and have been softened with microsol, I spray the model one more time with a layer of gloss varnish in order to help the oils I'll be doing next flow into the recesses of the armor more easily. Black oil washes are key to getting a nice looking and easy metallic scheme, as they provide some really nice panel lining and definition to the armor with a minimal amount of work. To make this oil wash, I simply mix some lamp black oil paint with white spirits. I next apply this wash to the recesses of the Marine's armor by gently tapping my loaded brush to the model where I wanted to apply the wash. Because of the gloss varnish applied previously and how thin the oil wash is, it will naturally flow into all the recesses without you having to really do much work for it. I try to be pretty neat here and only get this wash where I want it to go, but if you accidentally mess up, you can always use a foam makeup remover to gently wipe away any excess oil paint once it's dried. After I'm happy with the oil wash, and I'm sure there's no additional oil where I don't want it to be, I give the model a coat of Vallejo matte varnish to seal the oils in so they don't rub off. I use Vallejo matte varnish here specifically as I find it actually is pretty satin and provides a nice finish for metallic paint schemes. Do not though use AK Interactive Ultra Matte or similar varnishes here, as it will ruin the effect and make the model look grey instead of silver. I painted the eyes of this model in a rather traditional way, in which I start by painting the eyes black and then paint smaller and smaller layers of Deep Red, Antares Red, and Mars Orange from scale 75 in the lower corners of the eye. I finish off the lenses with a small dot of white in both the top and bottom corners of the eye to represent light reflecting off of the glass lenses. The model is getting pretty close to done here, but there's still a few more details we have to do. To start with, I paint all the ribbing behind the knees and on the arms with anthracite gray and then wash with known oil. I then move on to the bolter and start by painting the casing with flat black and edge highlighting it with graphite gray. I also use the same heavy metal to paint the rest of the metallic areas of the bolter and then wash with known oil as well. For the last details, such as the winged skull on the chest and the skull on the backpack, I start by painting them with decayed metal from scale 75. I then highlight this with Dwarven Gold and wash with Reikland Flesh Shade to get a nice warm reddish tint to my metals. Finally, I finish it off by highlighting again with Peridot Alchemy from scale 75. Peridot Alchemy is a pretty cold and desaturated gold color, and I like using it here for the highlight as it adds a little bit of tonal contrast between the rich red of the Reikland Flesh Shade in the shadows and this cold kind of gold at the very top. I then base the model to match the rest of my Astral Claws army, and it's done. If you're interested in more videos on how to paint Space Marines from the Badab War, check out my Sons of Medusa tutorial here.